we're going to head to our segment called the Talkback now, where we answer some of the listeners, watchers, viewers, I guess you'd call them. Josh Hart did not play well last night against Golden State. Look, he's been an engine for this team for most of the year. Do you have a concern about Hart based on last night, or what are your thoughts on where he is right now?
I mean, a little bit, because it's starting to become a little bit of a trend, right? Like, he's the engine of this team. And against these, highly ranked teams around the NBA, not just the Warriors, but obviously the Thunder, the Celtics, the Cavaliers, Josh Hart hasn't played particularly well against those teams either. And I said it earlier in the show. I said a lot of those teams are big, and there's certain times where Josh Hart's heart, for lack of a better term, has overcome a lot of, the height disadvantages that he may have. And I've said it on Twitter many times. I think I call him the Carmelo Anthony of Draymond Greens, right? Like, he's the dude who just kind of does everything and, just is the ultimate glue guy. And any team that is already good, he makes them better. That being said, I think he still has to sort of find his way when Mitch sort of ingratiates himself back into this lineup and this rotation. And, there's been a lot of teams sort of daring him to shoot lately. And a lot of those times where Josh Hart has had those big games is when those teams have dared him to shoot and he's made him pay for it. There's more than a handful of times, not just against this Warriors team, but against many other games in the past several weeks where he's just dribbling in front of people who are giving him 4 or 5 foot of space to shoot the ball. And if he doesn't catch it in rhythm and let it go, it messes up the entire offensive rhythm. And he's just sort of looking around trying to get the ball to Jalen or getting the ball to somebody who could help sort of create. I'll never be worried about his rebounding ability. I'll never be worried about his ability to play make and especially work on the fast break. I personally believe if Mitchell Robinson does find himself in a starting lineup against these bigger teams, that Josh Hart would probably be best suited coming off the bench and being that guy who could start sort of be the engine for the reserves for the New York Knicks. That's been another sort of Achilles heel for this team, even though I love Deuce McBride and the fan favorite he's become. Cameron Payne's had some really good games. Landry Shamet has starting to really come on as far as a long-range shooter. I think Josh Hart coming off that bench gives them a more of a bigger punch. And, if he's doing this against starters, I'd love to see him do this against reserves and not just keep the Knicks above water, but I think it gives the Knicks an advantage having a guy like that you could bring off the bench that can score, that can defend, that could rebound, that can push the break, get open shots for those shooters like Payne, like McBride, and like Shamet. So I'm not terribly worried about him, but, the games against these higher competition teams, it does sort of start to concern you when they're letting him shoot and he's not taking advantage of it.
Yeah, another decision for Tom Thibodeau to make down the stretch of games over the course of the next few weeks here. I think we have Matt Spenley back. Matt, are you with us?
You guys got me now?
All
Can
right,
you hear me?
you.
Sorry, guys, my mic died in the middle of the show. So I will say my 2 Josh Hart points I was going to make when I asked Kaz the question. 1, 3 of his 6 single-digit scoring games have come over the last 18 games in which he's shooting 17% from 3. So obviously we know he's not a great three-point shooter, but that's been to change. Tim, on the Hart point, I want to talk a little bit just about something we've talked about the entire year, and I know you've talked about too on your podcast, is just the Knicks' struggle against the top teams, and Hart and Brunson being open and honest about that on the most recent Roommates show, talking about that right to the fans. So I want to know, number 1, how you feel about the Knicks' struggles against specifically Cleveland, Boston, OKC. And then number 2, just your feeling on those guys kind of going directly to the fans to talk about that and be earnest about that.
Well, Perk doesn't want players to do podcasts, and neither do I, because I think they should leave the Hoop Collective all the audience. No, listen, I honestly, it's funny that because Brunson has always been very guarded with the media, but the guy's got a great personality. So to me, it's funny that he's doing a podcast and having so much fun with it. But I appreciate the honesty, and I appreciate not sugarcoating it and them really addressing the issue head on. The Knicks are a very good team that you cannot consider a contender at this point just because they've not been able to compete with the teams that have established themselves as legitimate contenders. I mean, if you're getting, blown out by the best teams in the league, then obviously you're not in that class until or unless you can prove otherwise. And so that's where the Knicks are. They are a very good team that I just don't think you can take seriously as a championship threat.
I'd like to add to that. The one thing that Jalen Brunson said in that, the one thing Jalen Brunson said in the Roommates podcast was that I think as a Knicks fan, after seeing, not just not competing against the top teams, but getting blown out, is he said, we have everything we need in this locker room, right? Like, and if you're a Knicks fan, if you're somebody who's seen this team, pretty much have their way with the rest of the league, except for these three teams. That's what you want to hear. You want to hear, especially if you're, a franchise player, your captains, the heart and soul of your team are doing podcasts, and, it's almost like a state of the union to your fan base. Mm-hmm. Like, they want to hear a reason why they should still believe that if they run up against the Cavaliers or if they run up against the Celtics in the Eastern Conference playoffs, that they have a chance. And, what they have shown in this season so far is that they just do not. They've shown flashes. They've shown abilities. We've seen, quarters where they've looked like they can hang with the Celtics. They've seen quarters where they look like they can hang with the Cavaliers. They have been able to put it together for 4 quarters so far. And Jalen Brunson straight up, owning it and saying how frustrating it is and not trying to make it seem like, what a lot of players seem to do, where it's not a story. Like, they've embraced it. They talk about it. They know that it is a thing. So, him saying, like, we have everything we need to beat these guys in our locker room right now, definitely, calls off the dogs, probably turns off the alarm signals as a Knicks fan. But then you got to go out there and do it. They still got 2 more chances to go out there and at least prove that they can hang with these guys before the regular season. And then who knows? Lots of crazy things happen on the way to the playoffs. Lots of crazy things happen in the midst of the playoffs. So I don't want to, bank on, well, maybe they might have to play the Cavaliers or the Celtics. No, you want to at least show that you can beat these guys before anything. And, I think with, the Roommates podcast, which I love listening to, and I think it's great, and I think they should still continue to do it, contrary to what Kendrick Perkins says.
Yeah, I agree.
It's definitely what has ingratiated this particular ideation of the Knicks to this fan base, because they've been so earnest and they've been so likable, and they haven't run from any smoke, man. They've absolutely taken it on the chin, and that's what you want from your team: accountability.
I will say, when they had Cuban on there, Brunson went soft. They didn't get into the smoke. They danced around the smoke on that.
He was being a pro. He was being a pro, man. At that time, it all worked out for everybody at that time. So
hey, there's a chapter in the book that delves into that whole thing, and trust me, it wasn't all warm and fuzzy between the Brunson family and Cuban.
I don't think so. But hey, once again, thank you, Dallas. Appreciate you.
Excellent tease, Tim. Excellent tease. All right, Ian, back to you.